energized and ready to train, to take that next step and to be the future. And we've talked about that a lot today, and we'll continue to do so. I'm also delighted to say, on the female side of things, that 80% of the participants yesterday were female, so I think that deserves a round of applause. It's an incredibly male-dominated industry, aviation, at the top levels, and that's why we're working very hard to change that balance. So personally, I've worked on the continent for 7 years, and I'm absolutely passionate about seeing air connectivity grow, and that will be to the benefit of the tourism industry here in Africa. So before to start, I just wanted to share a few statistics with you. Okay, this is taken from Elsier's, from UNWTO, their Tourism Highlights edition, which I'd encourage you all to download. It came out this week, and it absolutely illustrates the importance of aviation to tourism. Over 50%, over half of the world's tourists arrive at their destination by air. So if aviation did not exist, the market would be less than half the size globally. Just think about that for a minute, what aviation means. So I think that's a really important thing to say, and what I would say to the Ghana Tourism Authority as well is, the airlines that bring the people here are your most important customer. Without them, you can't bring the people here from an international context. The second slide. Over 80% of all international tourists to Africa, so we heard from Elsia that it's around 60 million, 80% come on a non-African airline. So again, think about that. The African share of international tourist arrivals by their airlines is only 20%. And that's why it may be a bit controversial. What I would say at the moment is, for many of the airlines in Africa, don't fight that battle, because the opportunity is intra-African. Connectivity. So there are only 2 countries in Africa that are connected to more than half of the other countries. Only 2. Ethiopia and Kenya. All other countries have less than, what would it be, 27 countries they're directly connected to. That's why when you travel around the continent, you always have to go somewhere else. 6% of people have to transit on an intra-African flight through a non-African hub. So that's Paris, that's Amsterdam, that's Dubai, whatever it may be. That needs to change. And that's what we want to do, and that's the purpose of this. If we can really engage and help our indigenous air transport sector grow, but we have to focus on the intra-African opportunity. The cost. So on average, the average fare to fly on an African airline is 50% higher than it is at the global average. So it's much more expensive. That again is something we need to lobby for. We need to reduce those costs so that it becomes something that's affordable to everybody in this room and everybody outside in the book fair and everybody in the streets of Accra. And that's what, again, we need to do. We need to lobby governments to say that aviation is not a cash cow. You cannot just keep adding more and more taxes, taking money. If you reduce it, you'll stimulate more growth, you'll make more money, you'll make less per passenger, but they will be spending their money here. They will be spending their money in Africa. So it takes a progressive approach, and there are certain countries that are doing that very well. And the last stat is the spending on aviation. This is from the World Bank report last year. So you can see what the average African government spends on aviation, 2%, versus roads, 67%. So realistically, you know, that ratio needs to change as well. The infrastructure has to keep up with this predicted growth that we've talked about. So I hope this sets the scene a little bit for all of you, and hopefully it provides a bit of food for thought. And the question that we're answering today is how to harness this. So how do we improve this air access? Visas as well is a huge issue we'll be covering today. So I'd like to properly introduce the panel. You can see them all up on there. But we have Aaron with us from South African Airways. We have Carmen, who's from Forward. Taiwo from IATA, who's flown in this morning from Lagos, Jeanette from Marriott, and Yao from Westgrove from Cape Town. So what I want to start with, I'll come and sit down, but I'll ask the question first, is I want to go to Taiwo first. One of the biggest things that's happened this year, and I was there in January at the African Union, is that we signed the Single African Air Transport Market. So have you heard of that? Put your hand up if you've heard of the Single African Air Transport Market. I think they need to do some PR. So this aims, we hope, to obviously open the skies, but what I want to do is get Taiwo to tell you a little bit about what it is, what the potential benefits are for tourism, and how it's progressed. So over to you, Taiwo.
Thank you, John. So basically, Single Africa Air Transport Market is the flagship project of the African Union, and it is arguably one of the most important aeropolitical initiatives on the African continent. Why? As you've already mentioned in your opening bit, Africa needs to be connected. And unfortunately, Africa isn't that well connected at the moment. So, connectivity is important to Africa because it helps with our social, economic, and political integration. So, the SATAM, to answer your question, is a situation whereby one African carrier can fly to another African state using a simple notification procedure. And the whole point of that is to simplify air transport connectivity. What we have now is a situation of bilateral agreements between different states, different terms, lots of complexities, and that's really what has given us a fragmented air transport market that we have today. In the last panel session, you mentioned a policy that took 13 years. Well, the SATAM was launched in 2018, but it actually dates back to 1988. And that is with the Yamoussoukro Declaration, which later on became the Yamoussoukro Decision in 1999. And both of those, from the declaration to the decision, the collective will of African heads of states and governments was to reform the air transport sector and make it more accessible. And from 1988 to 2013, and we really have to commend the strong leadership of the African Union and the African Civil Aviation Commission and all the other stakeholders. You mentioned Accra in the presentation, that's the African Airlines Association. We have UNECA. It was a very strong collaboration. So from 2013 to 2018, that's 5 years, we went from the declaration of the AU to the adoption in 2015, and now in 2018, the launch was formally announced. I think that's fantastic, and I think all people involved in the round of applause. We went from 25 years to 5 years of significant progress. So, yeah, that's essentially what the SATAM is.
Just give us a bit of an update in terms of how it's progressing with adoption and implementation.
Well, it was launched, but of course, the launch doesn't mean you flick a switch and Africa is automatically connected. It takes a lot of negotiations in terms of how it's going to be regulated, in terms of the cooperation between airlines, and we have an airline guru here who can give us more information on that. So Africa is going to do it its way. In May 24th, there was the 4th meeting of the ministerial working group, and a big step was taken at that meeting, which was to harmonize bilateral air service agreements to make sure they're more compliant with the Yamoussoukro decision. And that means removing clauses in bilateral air service agreements that are incompatible with the YP in terms of capacity, fares, routes, and so on and so forth. So that was a big thing that was done, and there was also a memorandum of implementation signed for all states that ascribe to that memorandum of implementation. Even without the bilateral exercise agreement signed, they are committed to the spirit of the wider.
Okay, so fantastic. So you mentioned what would the airlines, it comes down to the airlines implementation, etc. There were 23 countries that signed it in January of the African Union, and it's a pillar of the AU, which is 2063, as you say. So that's what I'd like to ask Harry, who's our airline representative. So South Africa was one of the 23 signatories of the SATCOM. So in terms of South African Airways, how do you view it? And realistically, how do you see the implementation process working?
Thank you, John. I think as an airline, not even just as South African Airways, as an airline, we really have to hold our heads in shame because we are the culprits that have made Africa not to be connected. Because we influence our governments. We tell our governments that don't open up the skies because we're going to compete amongst ourselves. Having said that, there is another element that I also want to highlight from an airline perspective, and it's that we cannot in any way continue to say that the governments are unfair by opening up the skies, because our people are all over the world, and we need to be able to be competitive enough to say that not every African country must strive to have a national carrier. Because when you do that, you then shackle us as airlines to only restrict ourselves to operate in specific areas. Then we start saying, no, but the SATAM is not going to work for us because South African Airways is too big. They're going to come and cannibalize the market, and we must be protective. But what are you protecting? Who are you protecting yourselves against? So, one of the statistics that you mentioned, that you showed there, is critical and indicative of the fact that, do you know that if you take the 4 biggest airlines on the African continent, South African Airways, Kenya Airways, South Africa, Ethiopian, and Egypt Air, combine the number of aircraft that we have, combine the number of passengers that we carry in a year, and combine the amount of revenue we generate in a year, we are not even 1/3 the size of one Middle East carrier. So what are you talking about? We are not even looking at things the way Judy said. It must be reflective of, are you opening your eyes and your ears to see what is going on the ground? So SATAM to us as African Airways is a very good process. We think that we have been as airlines trying to tell our governments to say, open up. Don't worry about competition. Competition is good for the consumer. It's good for the country, and it's good for the continent. So we are solidly behind the single Africa air transport market. We want it to be implemented as quickly as possible because that's the only way we can be competitive as African airlines.
Really refreshing, really awesome work, yeah. Oh, Taiwo just wants to come back.
Yeah, just to touch on the point made by Aaron, the single Africa air transport market is indispensable to tourism in Africa, simply because when the SATAM is fully operational following its launch, more routes equal more competition. More competition equals lower fares. Lower fares equals what? More passengers. More passengers automatically means more tourists for business and leisure. So the tourism industry has a vested stake in the success of the single African air transport market.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying on that one.
John, can I quickly just...
Yes, John.
So, speaking to your point, but is there accountabilities that are going into these actions? Because it's taken 5 years, it's taking another 5 years. Are we really actively being accountable to making sure that this is moving forward? So,
definitely. As I mentioned before, we couldn't have gotten where we are now, especially with other forces working in the background. As we alluded to, we couldn't have gotten to where we are now without strong leadership and accountability. So the African Union outlined 12 projects. Aviation was the first, because they've seen that as the foundation for everything to move. The African passport is another one. So there are different pillars that need to be in place for things to move along successfully. So